Well, we're concluding the message series today, the question no one's asking. But as we said all throughout the series, we hope it's the question that you begin to ask at every decision, at every turn, at every opportunity. And the reason we want you to keep asking it is because it's not a one and done question. That the answer that you may get from this question will change as your life situation changes. We started with the words of Paul, who wrote something to our fellow believers who were living in the city of Ephesus. It's found in the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, verse 15. And he said these words, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise." Paul said if you want a life that counts, you've got to be careful, first of all, how you live. And you've got to live as wise people, not unwise people. So that led us to ask the question, before every decision, before every opportunity, to ask this question. And you say it with me, what is the thing to do? One more time, last time we'll say it together. What is the thing to do? What is the wise thing to do? Not what's the legal thing to do. We all know the legal thing to do. Not what's the right thing to do. This is even a question that's better than right, because a lot of time when they kind of want to know what's the right thing to do, they're trying to get maybe as close to a line and it draws lines. But this is not about getting close to a line. It's better than legal. It's better than right. What is the wise thing to do? Trent started us off on this study with having you take a tape measure like this. I don't know if any of you have the tape measure that we had just 7 weeks ago. And the first thing he told you was to look up on the centimeter side the age that you are now, and then to just tear it off. And that becomes your past. Nothing you can do about your past, is it? Your past is your past. Then he told you to estimate about how long you think you'll live. Well, when I heard that, I went to a program and found a little thing called deathclock.com that kind of tells you when you will expire from this world. And for those of you who did that and found out that you should already have been expired, I apologize. But mine said that I was going to expire at the age of 89. So we take that. This is my forever. This represents being forever with God one day. And the amount that I have left right here, whether yours is this much, whether it's this much, or whether you're one of our students and you got a whole tape measure left, you got 100% of that time to influence not only your forever, but the forever of people around you. That was message 1. Message 2 and message 3 talked about the 4 types of people. And Solomon mentions the first one, and he calls it the wise person. And as we've said throughout this study, the wise person is the person who looks and says, in light of my past, in light of the things that I've struggled with before, in light of the things that have gone on in my life, what's the wise thing to do now? Solomon says the wise person then asks, in light of my current circumstances, in light of, hey, I just got a new job, in light of, hey, I just got married, in light of, I just graduated from high school, I'm about to go to college and be away from home for the very first time, in light of where I am right now, what is the wise thing to do? And then Solomon said the wise person then asked a third question. In light of my future, in light of my future hopes and dreams, the girl I want to marry, the guy I want to marry, the children I want to have, the job I want to have, the life that I want to live out there one day, what God has planned for me. What is the wise thing to do today? And then if you remember from that lesson, Solomon compares that wise person to 3 other types of people that exist in the world. The first one was the simple person. He said the simple person is not simple because they seek to be simple. The simple person is simple because they lack experience. They haven't lived long enough to know the wise thing. And isn't it true that the longer you live, the more wisdom that you gain, that you have? But he says then there's the foolish person. The foolish person is the person who knows the wise thing to do, but they're like, I don't care. I know what I should do. I know what would be good for me to do, but I don't care. This is what I'm going to do. And then the fourth type of person, he said, was the mocker. The mocker is the person that you generally don't even find in a religious setting. The mocker is the person who says, you know what, I don't care, and I'm going to make fun of those people who even try to follow what's wise. And we ended those messages with this thought: don't trade in what you want most for what you want in the moment. Don't trade in what you want most in life for what you may want in the moment. Message 4 talked about the wise use of our time. How if we're not careful, time, as the song says, will keep on slipping into the future, and it will get away from me. Message 5 talked about being wise in the use of our bodies and our sexuality. And message 6 from last week talked about seeking wise counsel from others. And so to end this series, I want you to look at a statement that's on the screen right now and see if you agree with it. To make wise decisions in any area requires an understanding of and a submission to the principles and rules that govern that area. Would you say that's true? That to make wise decisions in any area requires an understanding of. I've got to know how it works. I need to know how it works. And then a submission to. Because it's not just enough to know that a car or a boat or a plane or a skateboard will take me from point A to point B. It's only when I submit and get in a car or a boat and get to one of those places. And wise decisions require understanding and doing. Jesus once said this in John 13:17, now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Jesus knew something about all of us. He knew something about the people of his day, and he knows something about the people of our day, that a lot of times we are more content to believe something than we are to do something, aren't we? I mean, it's easier to believe that maybe I should cook a meal for my neighbor than it is to actually take the time and cook a meal for my neighbor. It's easier to believe that I should volunteer for a ministry than actually get involved in that ministry. It's easier to believe something, Jesus would say, than it is to do something. But he would turn around and say, you're blessed not when you believe something, but when you do something, because doing is what makes the difference. Most of you know that right after I graduated from Lipscomb, I went to Hawaii for 2 years and worked for a church there, but I actually majored in accounting with a minor in computer science. And when I got back from Hawaii, went into the business world where I worked at a company called Hermitage Explosives Corporation, where I stayed for 21 years before being convinced that maybe starting a church would be a good idea. Well, we sold at that explosives business not only high explosives, but we employed a team of blasters who worked there as well. And it's funny to me that nobody in my first day there, as much as I was excited about being a part of the team, as much as I was excited about knowing things about explosives, and that was every little boy's dream, no one invited me on my first day there, or my first week there, or even my first month there. None of the blasters ever came up and said, hey, Tom, we want you to go out and lay out, load, and detonate the shot today. Nobody said that to me, even though I wanted it, because they knew something. They knew that when the stakes are high, that to actually do something that's safe not only for me, but for them, that you got to know some things. You got to know the principles of rock. You've got to know the principles of fly rock. You got to know the principles of combustion, of the strength of the different explosives that you would use. And we use some very powerful explosives. One of our least powerful explosives was actually the product that Tim McVeigh used when he made a bomb and detonated the Oklahoma Federal building. He used a little over 2,000 pounds of what's called ammonium nitrate fuel oil mixture. And on any given day, we would use 10 times that amount of ammonium nitrate on a single shot. And we would have somewhere between 10 and 15 shots a day across Middle Tennessee that we would perform. So you can see when the stakes are high and you can visualize the damage that the stuff can do, why they don't look at you and say, hey, we're going to take it easy today, new kid on the block. You come and you do all of these things. There were certain things that I had to cognitively know and then submit to. There are principles about blasting that I learned that if you applied those principles, you could take a very powerful and potentially very dangerous subject and you could build some massive structures and you could do some wonderful things with it. And then you could even take that same thing and you could build or you could make some dramatic sculptures that people would look at for years, as in Mount Rushmore. I don't know whether you know, most of that was used from Alfred Nobel with explosives that he made. You could also do one of the things that we had an opportunity to do was in the Badlands of South Dakota. They are, as a tribute to the Native Americans in our country, building out of rock a sculpture of a crazy horse. You can see there just how big the face is already. They started that several years ago. If you can see way up there in the top, no, go back to that one where we were. Way up there in the top corner, that's 3 little men on that, right under that scaffolding. You can see how huge that is. Most of that made out of knowing where to put dynamite, where to put blasting caps. One day you can go to that next one, that sculpture, what it will look like. And then go one more, you can see there, yeah. Amazing what you can do with that. But it only happens because people know the principles of and then apply the principles that make that area work. And that same principle applies in every area of your life. It is why some people turn to attorneys. Because we know enough to know that we don't know enough when we are injured in a car accident and need help. We know enough to know that we need to seek the advice of someone else. And isn't that what you know when you go to the doctor? Because you have something going on and you go to the doctor and you need help because you know you need the advice of someone else. And let me ask you, what if you you were having some little chest problems, you got a little bit nervous and you went to your doctor and he said, I think you need to go over to the emergency room. So you go over to the emergency room and you have another physician that looks at you and they say, hey, you know what? You need emergency bypass surgery. And the doctor looks at you and says, and I'm sorry that you need that, but on another front, I am very, very excited. And you look and you say, why in the world would you be very, very excited that I'm going to have emergency bypass surgery? And they say, because you're my first patient. I've never I've assisted, I've watched, I've got all the training, I've read all the books, and you're going to be my first. And you're like, not on your life, you know. I'm going to another place because you want someone who not only knows the theory and knows what to do, but generally when the stakes are high, you want someone who has applied that on other people. It's why when you get audited, people will seek out the advice of a CPA. It's why when our car breaks down, we seek out the advice of Jeff Loftus. Because intuitively, you and I both know that to make a wise decision in any area of our life, we have to turn to people and we have to turn to principles that govern how those things work, and then we have to apply those. So, when I went out on my very first shot, you know what I did? I did what I was told to do. When the blaster said move here, where do you think I moved? I moved here. And when the blaster said take this material and drop it down that hole, I took this material and I dropped it down that hole. And when the blaster would look at me and say, now take this wire running from this cap and put it in this hole and attach it to this material and drop it down, I took that wire, that hole, that material, and I did exactly what he said. And when the blaster said, don't hook this wire up until we give you the word, I said, would you repeat the word? Say the word again. Would you spell the word? Because I want to make sure that I know what word we're talking about here, because I don't want there to be many misunderstandings when it comes to this. I did exactly what they said. And I asked 100 questions. And you know, there were times that they would give me answers that I didn't understand why we were doing it the way we were doing it. But you know what I did in those cases? I submitted, or I deferred to their judgment. Because they knew the principles. And they knew the laws that govern those things. And you know what happened over time? As I submitted to people who knew more about that than I did, I began to have those aha moments. Oh, that's the reason we did this way. That's the reason we did this way. It explains why 30 years ago, I got the idea I wanted to change my own brakes. I wanted to save a couple $100, and it's the last time I've ever done it. I had a mechanic at Hermitage Explosives that told me what to do. He was kind of leading me through it. He just forgot to tell me one thing, that before you move the car, you have to pump up the brakes to make the brakes work. I don't know if that's still the case or not. I know so little about that kind of stuff now. But back then, that's what you had to do. Well, I didn't know that. Well, my boss had pulled up behind me. He had just purchased his wife a brand new red Cadillac. And he pulled up about 20 feet behind me. And one of our blasters pulled up kind of over to the left of him, but left enough room for me to kind of wiggle out the middle there. And he pulled up in a truck full of blasting caps. Well, all of a sudden, I got in the car, and I was so happy. I mean, my chest was bumping because I was so proud, because it seemed like a manly thing to do, and I'd done a manly thing, and I was excited about doing a manly thing. Because when you have a voice as high as my voice, any opportunity you get to do a manly thing, you are like, yes, go for it. And so I was doing like chest bumps on the inside that I had changed the brakes on this car, and I began to back down that little ramp they had made for me and realized this car is not stopping. And I didn't have enough sense to try the emergency brake. To this day, I don't even know if it would have worked either. But anyway, I didn't try it, and I had a split decision to make. I knew I was going to hit something. Do I hit my boss's new red Cadillac for his wife, or do I hit Ron Gilbert's truck full of explosives? Which do I do? I chose the explosives. I still don't know if I made the right decision, but I'm here. But in the end, it wouldn't have been enough to just know that I needed to pump the brakes. It's why Jesus said, "Blessed are you," not when you believe something, not when you know something, but you are blessed when you act on what you know. So jumping to the end here, where are we going to end? We're just going to end with a verse today that I hope makes a lot of sense to you. Why is it that we will submit to doctors and lawyers and blasters and mechanics, but we have trouble submitting to the Father who made the blaster, who made the accountant, who made the doctor, who made the blaster? Why is it that we will submit ourselves to a body of people who can help me with my health, but sometimes have trouble submitting to the God who created the doctor, who helped me? That I'll submit to the words of the attorney, but I have trouble submitting to the God who made the attorney, who gave me the words. Solomon, in Proverbs, the verse I want to turn to, chapter 9, verse 10. Listen to these words. He said, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. If you know anything about Solomon at all, he was the wisest man that ever lived. He prayed for wisdom, and God gave him wisdom in spades. But even Solomon, if you read the book of Ecclesiastes, will tell you he didn't use all the time what God gave him. That although he knew the wise thing to do in certain areas, he didn't always do that. And because of that, he got into quite a bit of trouble in his life. And he says, "I chased after everything out there." He said, "There was no pleasure that I denied myself. If I had an appetite for it, I went for it, because I had the money and I had the power and I had the ability to do it, even though I knew it wasn't what I needed to do." So Solomon gets towards the end of his life, and he writes, he says, every bit of that was vanity. He said it was like chasing the wind. Because when it all came down to the bottom line, what I realized was this: that the beginning of wisdom was not even the search for wisdom itself. The beginning of wisdom was to look to the Creator of heaven and earth and say, "I submit my will to you." When you look at the verse here, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Fear in this instance actually means this: it's a recognition and a reverence that leads to submitting. It is the recognition that God, you are God and I am not. That God, you know about my husband more than I know about my husband. You know about my wife more than I know about my wife. Father, you know about my friends. You know about my job. Solomon says the beginning of wisdom is to wake up every morning and just acknowledge, God, you are the King of the universe. And even when I don't understand what you're asking me to do, I will do what I did with the blasters when I didn't understand what they were asking me to do. God, I will defer to your judgment because I know that you were the one who knit me together. You were the one who created me when I was in my mother's womb, and you know me better than I do. Last week, Trent told the students who were here, he said, there will never be a people group on this earth who love you and who have your best interests at heart more than your parents do. And I would submit to you today, not only students, but adults, every one of us in here, there will never be a person on this earth who has your best interest at heart more than your Heavenly Father does. And He doesn't put things in His Word to keep you from something. He has something for you. And Solomon says, take it from me. Take it from a guy who wanted to learn everything he could, who sought wisdom and sought all of these things, but never or had a hard time using it. Take it from me that the beginning of wisdom would have just been to acknowledge, God, you are God and I'm not. And I will submit my life to you. So, in light of your past, in light of where you've been in life and the things you've struggled with, in light of what your family is like and the things that you're doing, in light of your current circumstances, in light of, wow, I think I'm going to get married, in light of, hey, I'm going to be away from home for the first time, in the light of, hey, I just asked somebody out and they said yes. In light of where you are now, and in light of what God has for you, in light of the person you want to spend the rest of your life with, in light of, did I put it in my pocket? In light of what amount of time you have left, what is the wise thing to do? Solomon says, Tom, if you not only ask that, but answer that, as you walk with me, as you walk with God, you will have instances in your life where you look back and you say, that's why you told me to do that. Didn't understand it at the time, God, but that's what you were doing. And that's what was happening. And Solomon says, the beginning of wisdom, it's not believing something. The beginning of wisdom is not contemplating what God wants me to do. The beginning of wisdom is saying, God, even when I don't understand it, I have already decided that I'm here to follow you. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I hope that for us as a church, that in men of integrity, in our ladies groups, in our church family, that we will be a family who looks and says, God, in spite of my past, in spite of where I am today, and in spite of where you want to lead me, not what's the legal, not what's the right, but what's the wise thing to do, and then make the best decision you could ever make. Already decide that you're going to follow your Heavenly Father.